I forgot to hit my record button. Today we're going to be doing the webinar, Take Control of Your Finances with Amazing Charts Practice Management. My name is Katie Phelan. I'm one of the practice management trainers here at Amazing Charts, and I will be running the webinar. Everybody who is on the webinar today will remain muted for the entirety of the presentation, but of course if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can send those to me through the participant panel. There are two places where you can send them, the first one being in the questions pane, and then the other one in the chat. So regardless of where you send your questions, I will get them. And I have left time at the end of the webinar today to go over those questions. Like all of our webinars, this is being recorded, so before the end of the week, you should all get a copy of today's webinar so you could listen to it again, or if there's anybody else that wanted to attend today but couldn't, you'll be able to provide a copy of the webinar to them. And if anyone is interested in more of a deep dive demonstration of Amazing Charts Practice Management, at the end of today's call, I will be putting up the contact information for you to reach out to our sales department, and you can schedule some time with our demo specialist. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen with you. And we're going to go ahead and begin with talking about the integration between Amazing Charts and Amazing Charts Practice Management. So most of you may already be using Amazing Charts, at least for the clinical part of your practice, and then you may be interfaced with another practice management. The way that the integration works with RPM and Amazing Charts is that our PM is run through Java, and during the implementation process, we connect you with the Amazing Charts program, and that's something that would be done by an implementation specialist here at Amazing Charts. And once you are what we call installed with Amazing Charts Practice Management, you will have new access points to open up the practice management portion of the program within AC. So Amazing Charts, you'd still log in as you do today, but you'll start to see these links or shortcuts that would allow you to then navigate over to the practice management side of the program. And the practice management side of the program is where you would register patients, manage their charts from a billing perspective. It's also where you do all aspects of scheduling in the system. And the good news is for those clinical staff that are not going to want to have to go over to the practice management side of the program just to see basic demographics or appointment information, you will be able to see that in Amazing Charts. So anytime someone registers a new patient in Amazing Charts Practice Management or changes the demographics for a patient in Amazing Charts Practice Management, that information would also update in Amazing Charts, as long as that field exists in the Amazing Charts side of the program. Same goes for your schedule. So in Amazing Charts Practice Management, when you book appointments, cancel appointments, reschedule appointments, those appointments would also update in Amazing Charts. So Amazing Charts would continue to be the place where you would manage and store all of the clinical information for the practice. So for your medical assistants, nurses, doctors, etc., the workflow doesn't really change when you come on to the practice management product. It just usually impacts the front desk and the billing staff at the practice. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Amazing Charts Practice Management from AC by clicking on this icon along the top here. And again, you wouldn't see this unless you have been installed with Amazing Charts. And then when you open up Amazing Charts Practice Management, the first screen that everyone would be directed to would be the front desk. And one thing our clients learn a lot in the training of ACPM is the different ways that you can view and access information in the product. So from this screen here, you'll notice I can do all front desk activities. And the system's really broken down by the different staff that would be at your practice and where they would need to manage data in the system. So you'll see here over on the left, my front desk is highlighted in blue, indicating I'm on the front desk section of practice management. So here I can search for patients. There's a few ways to manage appointments. You'll see here, this is one of the 2 locations. I can manage recalls for my practice from here as well. But typically, front desk staff would spend the majority of their time in ACPM under the appointment scheduling link located up here under front desk activities. Because the appointment scheduling mirrors a book application, like many other PM systems. And here I'd be able to see the view of my provider schedule, and you'll see in my training environment, I have 3 columns, so I have 3 resources. This would be customized for your practice. And I'd be able to see all of the appointments that are booked for the given day. And you'll see over on the right, I could use a calendar to navigate through to different days if I wanted to. I can also use these buttons down here for navigation. And I can also look at multi-day views in our system. So if you like to look at 5 days at once, 7 days at once, I can do that. And then you can also customize the information that displays in the appointments section for the patient. So you can see for one of my test patients, Irene Smith, I've chose to show the date of birth, age, home phone number, and also the work phone number and the appointment type. So from a front desk perspective, you can just see a lot of basic demographic information right here if it's turned on. Otherwise, you can easily access a patient's chart during the check-in and check-out process by opening it right from the appointment. You'll also see here I can print encounter forms for that particular patient, a patient info sheet for them to review, or I can open up a new window to register a new patient. The front desk can also check eligibility right from here. Eligibility is coming more and more important for practices. And as we all know, as far as getting your return on your billing, it all starts at the front desk. Then making sure that the right information is being put in the system and that completed information is being put into the system. And our system does allow for unlimited eligibility checking. And the fee for eligibility checks is all rolled into your implementation or monthly fee. So it's all included. And we do offer electronic eligibility checking. So what that means is when you check the eligibility, it goes through our clearinghouse to the payer site. It matches up with what the payer has on file for that patient, and then it comes back and lets you know whether or not the patient is eligible for that data service. And if the payer responds back with benefit details, copays, deductibles, referral required, etc., that information would all be visible in the practice management for anybody to see. So if I go into a patient's appointment from the schedule, by right-clicking, you will see one of the options says eligibility. And if the eligibility had previously already been checked, I can view the details, or I could check it on the spot. So we do have automated eligibility checks for all of our practices. So as long as the patient's insurance is on the chart during the time the appointment is booked, their eligibility will automatically be checked before their appointment. And the standard is 2 days prior to the appointment, but that is also customizable. So if you'd prefer the check to be done a little bit sooner, maybe the day before, we can set the check to be done sooner or closer to the appointment. But as we all know, if it's a new patient, you may not have the demographics in there, or it may have been updated since their last appointment. So that's why we offer the ability to also do on-the-spot checking. And when that eligibility is checked, an icon will display next to the patient's appointment, indicating the eligibility status. So you'll be able to see very quickly whether or not the check has been done and what the status of the check was. If there is an X, it would be ineligible, check mark eligible, and there would also be another icon if the check could not be performed. And typically that would be either because the insurance was not set up, or maybe it's an insurance that cannot be checked electronically. And during the check-in and check-out process, the front desk typically is collecting and entering co-payments. So if I open up the patient's chart in ACPM, really everything that you would need to know from a practice management and billing standpoint for that patient is viewable right from within their practice management chart. I can see demographic information. I can see who the responsible party is for the patient, what insurances are active on their account, co-payment information, all of the past visits, so that's the data services and the balances for those dates of services. I can see a list of upcoming appointments, or I can also see appointment history for that patient. If any recalls, referrals, or authorizations were set up for that patient, I'd be able to see those. I can see a claim history for those dates of services for that patient. So all the times that something has been billed out of the system and the status of that bill. And even statements. So anytime a statement has been sent out for a particular patient in ACPM, that statement will be indicated in the patient's chart with the date, the amount, and a link to actually review the statement. So if the patient calls with questions or needs a copy of it. And as far as statements go, clients have two options with statements. They can batch and print their own statements for their patients, or You can sign up to have our third-party vendor, BillFlash, send statements on your behalf. And the amount to have BillFlash send statements for you is really comparable to what it would cost a practice to send statements themselves. So if that's something that you'd potentially be interested in, that would be discussed during your sales process. And any time that the front desk collects or enters a copayment in the system for the patient, that would be done within the chart, and you'd be able to see all of the money that has been collected and waiting to be applied to a data service. So the front desk, is able to easily view eligibility and check eligibility right from the patient's appointment and or charts. View and update any information that would be required to be done so before billing right from the patient's chart. And then we have a specific report that the front desk would also run at the end of the day called the deposit slip report, so that they'd be able to balance all of the copays that they've entered into the system throughout the day before they hand the credit card receipts, checks, and cash to the administrator for deposit. And then as far as the billing process goes, there's two ways to do the billing in Amazing Charts Practice Management: electronic charges and manual charges. So the electronic charge goes back to the integration between Amazing Charts and Amazing Charts Practice Management. So if I was the provider and I was in a particular patient's encounter and I was done with seeing that patient for their visit, when I click sign off, I can select some of the coding for that patient's visit. I can select the level of the visit, and I could either search and add CPT codes, or if you have quick codes set up for your practice, you can select additional CPTs from your quick code list. And by doing this, you're getting the billing started for the billing department, because all this information that I'm selecting in Amazing Charts, once I'm done and I sign off on it, it's going to transfer over into the patient's chart in Amazing Charts Practice Management for the biller to review, make any necessary changes to it, and then bill it out of the practice management system. So a lot of providers are already doing this to some extent. So again, the workflow doesn't really change for the provider. And the provider can see the CPT that they've selected. They can see the diagnoses that have already, you'll notice, linked with the CPT based on what is on the problem list and assessment for that patient's visit. I can see the insurance for the patient still from a provider perspective. And then when I click sign it, that is when the details of the charge will then go over to practice management. So you can see here, very quickly after hitting sign off, if I come into the patient's chart in practice management, it's sitting under that visit history for my biller to come in and review it prior to billing it out. In our billing screen, or charge screen, if you will, it's very straightforward in ACPM for the biller. They can select case types that are required for billing. Everything is editable, so if they have to put in more diagnoses or change diagnoses, You'll see my referral area is highlighted. This will highlight if there is an active referral that matches with the corresponding data service. So the system will give you a heads up whether or not you may potentially want to link a referral or if you had an active prior authorization to the charge. You can manage the CPT codes by adding modifiers, NDC codes. You can see the payer that is going to be billed for this charge. And again, of course, everything is in that patient's chart. So the biller could also just double check to make sure from the insurance standpoint and the demographic standpoint that all of that is also ready to go before I was to go ahead and bill out this charge for the patient. And when you do the billing in our system, we do it by batch. And when you do it by batch, it's up to you how you want to batch your charges to be billed. Typically, people do it by data service range. So if I know I've reviewed all my charges for yesterday, I would put in data service 410, and it would bring up everything ready to go for 410. But depending on the size of your practice, if you have providers that are credentialing or you're not approved with a particular payer yet to send electronic claims, there are these additional filter options that I can use to specify which providers I want to batch, carriers, which service locations, if I have multiple locations, plans, and I can even batch for a particular patient if I was closely monitoring a certain patient's claims. And when you batch claims in ACPM, they do have to go through a validation process. And our validation process is pretty basic. It's not until it gets to the clearinghouse where the validation is a little more payer specific, but we still validate your claims to make sure, do you have all of the information in the patient's chart that's going to be needed to send this out? And was it entered in properly? And if it wasn't, it would tell you on the validation that you're missing subscriber information from the chart. You're missing patient information from the chart. So the system is not going to send this information out until you do that, until you update that information. Do you have your plan addresses entered in the database? So it does help you initially, before you bill out of the ACPM system, make sure that a lot of the basic information has been entered in the system. And then once you send out a batch of claims, within minutes, you'll then be able to go into our clearinghouse, Claim Remedy, who we use exclusively, and view the claim batch status. So unlike other practice management systems where you might have to wait a little while, maybe even a day or so, to get your claim reports back from your clearinghouse to see whether or not they successfully were forwarded on to the payer for further processing, within minutes, you can log directly into our clearinghouse and see what the status is. So all users that would need to see claim status would get their own logins to our clearinghouse portal so that they'd be able to log in and review them. So I'm going to show you briefly what our clearinghouse looks like so you can get a little glimpse. So here I am. I'm going to show you my clearinghouse portal. I'm going to go directly to the claim file review screen. And this is where you'd be able to see the specific batches that you sent through the clearinghouse. There we go. So when you log into the clearinghouse and you go to the claim file screen, you would see the claim batch that was sent through ACPM, and it's indicated by a number. And Claim Remedy or Clearinghouse uses a color coding system. So green is good, red is bad. So anything that would display in the clearinghouse, in the claim file screen that's red, would need a follow-up by the practice, meaning that one or more claims in that batch did not pass the clearinghouse scrubber and need to be fixed and resent. And they use links and reporting for you to be able to see which claims did not pass. So you'll see I have a little error bucket. And if you click on a number under the error bucket, it would give you all of the errors pertaining to the claims that were not forwarded on. And again, this is done within moments after you send a claim batch. And anything obviously in green would mean that those claims were successfully forwarded. Additionally, in the clearinghouse, you can see other types of claim status, not only claim status when you initially send the claims through. I can go ahead, maybe a day or two after I submit a batch of claims, and I can see whether or not the payer has accepted those claims, rejected those claims. Eventually, I'd also even be able to see if they paid. Now, obviously, all of the payments are going to come into the practice management system for you to be applied to the patient's accounts. But the clearinghouse is the middleman. So everything has to kind of flow through the clearinghouse when we're sending electronic claims out, and also when we're getting acknowledgments and payments back through into ACPM. So when I want to look at that claim status, I can change my view to individual claims. And I'm working in a training environment. That's why a lot of this stuff is X'd out. But over here on the far right is where I want you to focus your attention in the column that says status. So I can see all the real-time claim status for my individual claims. And anything that's highlighted is a direct link to the electronic remit. And again, the electronic remit is waiting for me in Amazing Charts Practice Management to reconcile, but I can see it here as well by clicking on the link and opening it up. I can also sort my statuses. So this is really important from a billing follow-up if I needed to look specifically at all of my claims are in an accepted status, or if I want to just see anything that's rejected, I can search specifically for anything that contains the word rejected. And I could print this list out, or there again are hyperlinks that I can drill into to get further details as to why these particular claims were rejecting. There are also claim remedy reports. Over here on the far left is a reports link. So I can run reports to see how many claims I've uploaded, for example. or all of the different claim statuses that my claims are in, claims that have been denied by the payer, claims paid by the payer. I can specifically run the report for my rejections. I can run a scrubbing error report, and this would allow me to see, well, where are my scrubbing errors coming from when they go into claim remedy? Are they more front desk scrubbing errors or billing errors? And when you run any of the reports in claim remedy, you have, a lot of different filters that you can use to run those reports. And any of the reports that are run through claim remedy can also be exported. So if I wanted to run my rejection report, here are all the different rejections and just an overall description of it, the claim count and amount billed that were impacted. And then if I click on the little arrows, there's drill downs in the clearinghouse where I can get specific claim details and export that information. And I would know I'd have to go back into PM and fix these. We also have quite a few reports in Amazing Charts Practice Management to also make sure that you're reconciling your billing. We have an appointment charge exception report. This appointment charge exception report makes sure that for every patient that is on the schedule for a given date range has a corresponding charge in the practice management. So if you run this report in our system and there are patients listed on it, these patients need to be followed up on because they do not have charges yet in Amazing Charts Practice Management. And it could be maybe the front desk forgot to cancel these appointments. Did the provider not sign off on these patients' charts? Was the patient not actually seen? Did they walk out? And then on the other hand, we have another report called the Unbilled Transactions that makes sure for a given service date range that for any charges that are in the system, they are being generated as a claim. So they're actually being batched and billed out of the system. So this report would help a biller identify what hasn't been billed out and if there is a reason for it. And then finally, when your insurance payments start to come into the system, when they come in, they all show up in a particular bucket called pending EOBs. And these are coming in from the clearinghouse, claim remedy. And when you come in here, you'd be able to review the details of the ERA on a report before you actually do anything with it in the system. So it'd help you identify, are all the patients on this ERA dates of services that I've billed out of ACPM? Are some of them legacy payments? And of course, during the training, we work with the biller or payment poster and how you are going to manage an ERA if it had some patients on it with payments from your other legacy system and patients that have payments on it that were billed out of ACPM. But you'd be able to see that information before you even do anything with the electronic remit. You'd also be able to know whether or not there were denials or deductibles and copay transfers by looking at that report. And our system can be set up to auto-adjust certain adjustments adjustment codes. We automatically do it for 45, 253, and 237, but more and more clients are asking for other codes to be adjusted off because a lot of people are using the codes for reporting purposes, for macro MIPS, so those don't get paid on. So there is a particular code that payers will respond back with, just indicating that that code was for reporting purposes only. So we can set that up to auto adjust for you. That way making, the payment post or biller's life more easy when they are going to do electronic posting. Because obviously the point of electronic posting is to get, a large EOB potentially committed in the system in the shortest amount of time possible. But of course, there are going to be instances where maybe you are not set up to receive ERAs for a particular payer yet, or that payer just does not send ERAs. So you can do manual payment posting in ACPM as well. And the manual payment posting is not difficult. It's really just, you manually entering in the adjudication information pertaining to the EOB that you have. But our goal during the implementation process is to get you enrolled with as many payers for electronic ERAs as possible. And then we do have reports that you can run after your payments have been posted. Aging reports to see what's still outstanding. And we have two different types of aging reports. One that's pretty basic and one that is far more detailed. So our more detailed aging report is going to give you CPT information, diagnosis information, amount billed, if anything has been paid and adjusted. It's going to give you the insurance plan for the patient, who the policy holder is for that insurance. So a very, very detailed report. But it does give you your aging buckets. So you know what is outstanding by patient, 30, 60, 90, over 120 days. And then it also does break it out not only by patient, but by either insurance carrier or plan. So you can see, for each individual patient what's outstanding, but then overall for this particular plan, I have 147 unpaid claim lines. This is how much was billed, this is how much was paid, and this is what's outstanding for my different buckets for that particular payer. And then of course I can get my totals for all these different types of reports on the last screen. And then we have just your basic AR report. And a lot of our reports have different filters that you can use depending on the aging of the report that you want to do. And some of our reports also can be exported into Excel to help you manipulate the data. So this is our more basic aging report, and this can be broken down by patient as well. This doesn't give you any kind of charge details or specific policy information for the insurance that the patient has. So this would require a little bit more follow-up in the actual patient's chart than the other report. And then of course we have payment reports. So once you're done doing your payments, if you want to generate a deposit slip report for all the ERAs that you've posted with the check number and amounts, so you can reconcile with the bank, or just overall payment analysis reports, so you can see what you're collecting from your different insurance carriers and different insurance plans. So you can see straight for your different carriers or plans, the amount that was posted for a particular date range, and it does give you a percentage so you can see where, majority of your money is coming from for a particular date range. And it's up to you whether you want to run certain reports daily, weekly, monthly. It's up to you how often and the date range that you want to incorporate with the different reports. And then we also have different reports that you can run for your providers. So, depending on how you pay your providers, you can also run reports for particular providers to see how many visits and charge amounts, payments, adjustments that were billed out and posted for a given date range. So from a front desk perspective, there's a lot of different things put into place in ACPM to make sure that the front desk is making sure that they are inputting all of the information in the patient's chart before the billing's being done and checking that eligibility. And then they're balancing all of those payments that they're entering when the patient's coming in. And then from the billing perspective, there are numerous reconciliation reports to make sure that all the billing is getting done correctly. And of course, all of the billing follow-up is being looked at for claim status and aging, and then of course the payment posting. There are plenty of reports that go over or that all your payments are being reconciled and that you're able to report on those payments, whether from a practice level or even an individual provider level for your practice. So I haven't seen any questions come through. Hopefully that means that I've answered everything that you may want to know about ACPM. What I'm going to do now is I am going to bring up the slide with the contact information for our sales department in case you are interested in getting a more personalized demo of the program. You can spend some time with our demo specialist, Peter O'Driscoll, and talk about the different workflow needs in your practice to make sure ACPM is a good fit for you. And of course, if questions come up later on, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Everybody should have my email address from registering for this webinar. So, of course, feel free to send any questions that you have my way. So if anyone does have any questions, if you had joined late, if you want to send your questions through the questions or the chat area of the participant panel, it's down at the bottom. If you click on the arrow pointing at questions or the arrow pointing at chat, you can type in your question and send it to me. So if there are no questions, you are free to leave. And just to reiterate that everyone will get a copy of this webinar within the next couple of days from our marketing department. Oh, someone does have a question. So the question came through, if you go through the scrubbing errors and claim remedy, do the totals change in the scrubber error result report, or is that an ongoing total? It would be the scrubbing error report specifically would be the different scrubbing errors that you have received in claim remedy altogether. Whereas the claim guard reports, those reports will show you current scrubbing errors that still need attention. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close the call today. So again, thank you all for your time, and do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any further questions. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day and week.